Seema, can you hear us? Seema, can you repeat?
The people in the conference room. Are they speaking to me?
No, we haven't started the meeting yet. We'll start shortly.
So, Seema, they're going to have to use the microphones in order for you to be able to hear them, but we haven't started yet, so they're not doing that.
Okay, sure, that's fine.
All right, good afternoon, folks. We're going to start our first government's meeting of the year. We have two people who requested to be participants virtually, that being Seema Dixit. So we will vote on allowing Seema Dixit to participate virtually. All those in favor? Okay, Ms. Marin.
We just need to note that Ms. Dixit is virtual due to medical
Correct.
reasons, and she's currently in the Sully district.
Thank you for that detail. And it was unanimous for those of us here, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Marin, and myself. We also request for virtual from Ms. Sizemore Heiser, who is, I believe, in Boston, and, oh, sorry, my apologies. She's running late here. She's on her way. All right, so we will get started. So, I'm pulling up the agenda, friends. That's my plan. So we have a lot of work to do as a committee this year. Last year, governance, and for good reason, spent a significant amount of time talking about boundary policy, and therefore didn't necessarily get to those policies that we need to be routinely reviewing. It's also my understanding the prior year, there was a lot of rollover of policies that folks did not get to. So, and our priority right now, because of the follow-on motion that was at our July meeting, is for us to work on the grading policy, review it, revise it. So I'll just read that for folks who might be watching and they're not familiar with that. I further move that the school board direct the superintendent to suspend the work of the Secondary Grading Advisory Committee temporarily and pause in the adoption of additional recommendations regarding grading, and develop a clear charge for the Secondary Grading Advisory Committee to update its recommendations for secondary grading practices to align with the revised policy 2418 and the 2023-2030 strategic plan, and communicate to staff that the grading changes distributed to middle, secondary, and high school principals and teachers on June 10, 2024 will be implemented for 1 year only, pending the revision of policy 2418 by the school board and subsequent updated recommendations from the Secondary Grading Advisory Committee, and present the Secondary Grading Advisory Committee's updated recommendations to the school board in a public meeting no later than May 1, 2025, in time for implementation in the for the school year 2025-26. And I also believe that in order for the superintendent to sort of operationalize the policy, update the regulation, that we need to get a new policy to her in early November. So we, I don't want to fast track something and not do it well, because we can always adapt, but we will be meeting more frequently early on so that we can get that work done. What I have distributed, and I hope the clerk will be posting momentarily to board docs, is a list of policies that we need to consider at some point. I also, on my way into this meeting, was handed another list of policies that I'm not sure are incorporated into what is currently being posted. I was just handed an email that had some other policies, right? So what I've handed out to you in the meeting is what's being posted. And I want to, first of all, I should have done this up front, to thank Rachna for, Sizemore Heiser, for helping me get organized, and also Ms. Marin for helping me put together a viable agenda. As someone who was not on governments and now is a chair for the first time of any committee, I hope it goes well for all of us. But thank you, Ms. Marin. So the other thing is, so we want to sort of discuss and establish the priorities for this year, and our meeting protocols. Like I said, I'm not sure whether or not we might need to add some meetings between now and November. I know we prefer not to meet on the weeks that we have school board meetings, but we might have to just look at that to ensure we get the work done. So the other thing I wanted to touch on, I was going to wait for Ms. Sizemore Heiser to get here. So at any rate, I think that what I would like you to do, and this is sort of my purpose in distributing these policies, what I will do is take this email and incorporate it into these and revise the documents so that these other policies, I guess, that are of high priority and will be highlighted for people to know that they've been added. I'm thinking, because one of the documents that you're going to see is, where do the policies fall under? Do they fall under instructional services, special services, chief equity officer? Because I think we need to enlist staff to review policies and give us recommendations in terms of recommendations for edits, recommendations for no change, because as the policy is written, it actually still is appropriate, even though time has passed, and/or some that we might have to have, more further discussion around to make sure they're updated appropriately. So a couple thoughts is, amongst the committee members, we might sort of distribute certain ones or assign certain policies for you to look at in more depth and work with that particular staff person, so that we are all helping and we're not trying to do, 2x2s or whatever, but it's us with one staff member. So again, our priority is the grading policy, which we're going to dig deep into today. So are we sure Rachna's on her way here?
We were just informed that she is going to be virtual, so we're working to get her a link. We did not get the form, so we did not know.
Yeah, I thought she was supposed to be virtual. Okay. All right, so we'll wait on that. So really today, I think I want to hear from, folks. We did a work session on the grading policy, and I think that what we need to do is take a look at it, review it. What's not on the agenda for today, but eventually, is the 6 focal points that were touched on in that meeting, which were part of the June 10 email that was sent out to all teachers and administrators, which are the 6 focal points of reassessment, category weighting, minimum number of assignments, gradebook type, use of letter grades versus percentage grades, and use of zero. But before we get to that, I think I just want to hear from folks where they sort of philosophically live around this grading policy. I'm more of a less is more type person in terms of what might be included as in the policy to allow for instructional staff who are experts to operationalize. So I'm going to stop talking. And I'll open it up to folks for comment. Dr. Anderson.
Just very quickly, I was trying to state, are we going to go through some of the things that you have established in the agenda?
Yeah.
Because for some reason, I did not even think we would get to the conversation of that policy's content, because as the agenda.
Okay.
Are you just looking for, I think I'm unclear. Are you
Yeah,
looking for content
Yeah, thank you for that. I skipped ahead because I was waiting for Ms. Sizemore-Heiser to be present when we talk about some of the meeting protocols, since then that would have all 5 of us present. But we can, in theory, talk about our priorities for the year, and see if, folks are, what your thoughts are around, attacking the work.
I would be happy to give some feedback to that when you're ready for it.
Or,
The priorities for the year.
yeah, we can talk about that.
Well, first of all, I do appreciate how you have outlined, or whomever outlined this by area. I wonder,
That is Rachna, so give
okay,
Rachna
so
credit.
she gets all of that credit. Is this inclusive of this blue and white sheet? Or are these 2 separate sets of information?
She can answer that question, but my understanding is yes, it's supposed to be inclusive.
It's supposed to be inclusive. My other wondering is this prioritized in terms of what each of these departments feel that must happen right away? I know everything is kind of overdue, but if they are prioritizing some versus others, I would say that that should become our priority. So for example, for the chief academic officer, there's like, 9 things there? If 2 are of high priority, I'd like for that to be a little bit earlier on our agenda, and maybe the other 7 will fall in later on. But if there's some space for them to just star which ones are more urgent, then that would be helpful. In addition, I'd like for us to, in looking at the number of meetings that we have from now until November 1, for this committee, we have 4 meetings between now and November 1. And I think we need to ensure that we're prioritizing the grading committee meetings. It doesn't have to be the only thing that we do. Obviously, we need to walk and chew gum, but we need to prioritize that. If we have, 2-hour meetings, however you want to organize it, I think those 4 meetings should get us to the November 1st, timetable.
So you're thinking 4 is enough?
I'm thinking 4 is enough, if that's our priority.
Okay.
And it may be it may be the only thing that we get done. And maybe I'm being a
Well,
little
no,
bit
no,
too
no.
assertive.
My assumption is it's going to be the only thing we get done.
So-
Like, I agree with your suggestion, and I tried to articulate that, is that we will look to staff to prioritize the thing that fall under their area, and then do recommendations regarding no change or edits. And then for those where they're recommending some changes, there will be sort of assigned one of us from this committee to dialogue around that. And then, sort of bring thoughts to the future meetings. But yeah, I don't see us tackling those things until after we meet the November 1 deadline for grading. Okay, Ms. Marin.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for kicking us off, Ms. Leedy. So I think it would be helpful to talk about what we want to tackle to get this policy to the board for the November 1st, right? November 1st deadline? And even for this conversation today, rather than talking through our understandings of, well, I think this grading should be this way, and I think grading should be that way, talking about maybe it's those 6 things, and coming to the next, maybe coming to the next one with more content that we can discuss, and whether we need to ask the superintendent to come back and bring more content. I am hesitant to say this is the only thing we're going to focus on, and I'm not saying we have to do everything. However, the reason that we have this list of delayed policies is because it hasn't been kept up. So what I'd like to do is, can we plan out a timeline, either that some stuff is going to get done this fall, or we know after November what's going to continue with policy governance. There's this matter of even renumbering the policies so that they get back on that cycle, and I could see that waiting until after November. But I also want to be clear about this November 1st work session of the board. we can talk here, like, what's the expectation for what we're going to bring that day? Is it our best thinking plus, like, hey, here's the questions that we're undecided on, and board members, what do you think? Rather than, and then we have, because what's going to happen between November 1 and when, May? Isn't that when this, when we look at the language, it's that there's going to be a policy delivered. Well, then what's happening? Is that all staff work? Does it come back to governance? Like, I don't understand that, and I wonder maybe if the superintendent can speak to, what does this work look like? What if we set up parameters for the policy to be created for November 1st? I think that we had great intentions for this follow-on, and we're doing it, right? But now we're here. We've heard a presentation from the grading committee last week. We're now in the, 0 to 100 scale or 50 to 100 scale, right? So some things have changed. So what's going to be most helpful to not make this rushed and make it, something that's going to impact every single student in the school division?
So remembering we're really talking about secondary grading. So essentially credit-bearing coursework. But my understanding is we were to pause the grading committee and all grading conversations, period, until the board came back with a revised policy. Secondly, we were to make clear that the June memo that went out to principals was a one-year only endeavor. So I think we're waiting to hear what you all want in the policy before I set the charge to the grading committee to go to work. So I don't know, I think what we're having a conversation about is chicken or egg, right? So I think the grading committee put forward their recommendations. I think the board has a different direction perhaps they want to explore from those recommendations. So I think however you come to the policy, I had thought you were coming back as a policy as a governance committee with a policy to take to the work session for the board to say, yep, we think this is a grand policy or not. And then I would set the committee up with a charge based on that policy to deliver what would the regulation look like that would implement that policy, and that would be accomplished by May 1. And it can't really be later because people need time to transition if there's a transition for any particular group. So that's kind of what I thought, how you get to what you think is going to be the policy you take back to the work session. I'm open to whatever input you would like in whatever fashion you would prefer. I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm just mostly talking to myself.
Okay.
It's not my turn.
Melanie?
Well, so, thank you, and I agree. And I'm glad we clarified. Can we work forward then, so if 11-1 is the work session, then we need to vote on a policy? Like, have we mapped all that out so that the charge can go forward? Or is 11-1 when it comes to the board for a vote? Are we all clear about that?
I thought 11-1 was the work session.
Yeah, I thought 11-1 was a work session, so,
I just want to clarify.
yeah.
I'm looking
Yeah.
at it. I'm looking at it too.
Madam Clerk, do you know if that's just a work session, or are we supposed to, do we have a timeline for voting on the policy?
So I don't know that we've actually assigned it to a work session. I believe it's based off of the motion that the board made, is that it would come back to the board by 11-1. So I think, from my understanding from the chair and vice chair, we're waiting for it to come back, and they're planning on scheduling. But I don't know that we have a specific work session set out
Okay.
yet.
Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser will be joining us virtually as she's caregiving for someone with a disability. Under the New Virginia Code statute, we do not need to vote her in, and she will be counted for in-person quorum. So, my apologies.
I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, my headspace is a lot of places right now. Trying to follow how you do these kind of meetings. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, your hand up?
Yes, why don't I try? I have some comments on kind of the timeline.
Okay, go ahead.
Can we go ahead? I wasn't sure if I was next.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, say yes, I apologize.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I totally, appreciate it. My understanding, I think we talked to this when we passed the motion, is that since the grading committee's work is paused until we come up with a policy, that the governance committee is directed to come up with a policy by November 1st, which would then get to a work session and then voted on, I think, by January, is the call from what we talked about, so then the grading committee could come back into formation and then work on the, implementing the policy, whatever regulations, guidelines, et cetera, they needed to do. So I guess for me, because we've had, the first work session we had on grading was in 2022. We had another one recently. I don't think this is that different from when we did the boundary policy. I think we can, and I have a lot of faith in our chair and our committee to be able to get the work done by November. I think that's what the board had directed. So that was just my understanding. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, and I also thank Ms. Marin, who's working on our agenda. We do have those holds on some evening work sessions, and that might be an appropriate place for this conversation to take place, because I do think we have a hold on October 22nd. So that's certainly before November 1, and we have a regular school board meeting on October 24th. So we'll see where we are. I want to pause for a second and talk quickly about sort of like some meeting protocols. Because we have a lot of work to do, and this can be, honestly, there's parts of me that think that there's no way we're going to get this work done by November 1, because there's too many differing perspectives and opinions. And yet at the same time, I also think that we can break it down and probably get a policy done. Having said that, I just want to, try to make sure when we are meeting that people are, focused in terms of, and we sort of try to stay aware of how much time we're spending on the same idea, where we find ourselves repeating ourselves versus actually taking action or moving to a different idea. We kind of have to, I don't want to cut people off, but I do know that in my 6 months on the board or more, that there's sometimes where I feel like it's Groundhog Day and we're circling, again, and kind of saying the same things. So if anyone want to offer thoughts on that idea for me as chair? Ms. Marin.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your commitment to keeping us on time. I know today was the first day of committees, but I feel like they've been off to a rough start, late starts, people here, not there. It's hard. We're all busy. If we're going to commit, we got to be here and move forward. The thing that I'd really like to commit to, and what I'm gonna personally commit to, is doing the work in the committee meeting. I am not interested in having external conversations, the 2x2s as we call them, since more than 2 people together is not allowed by Virginia law for school board members. So I'd really like to come to these meetings prepared with work to discuss and debate, and not leave ideas for language and amendments to some off conversation. I also think that helps it to be really transparent. I do wonder, in terms of the policy, something we can keep in mind is that the policy is supposed to set the tone and the values. And so how can we stay in that higher level? And there might be some spaces where we want to be specific. But generally, how do we keep it at that higher level to let that grading committee and the superintendent really get into the weeds, which we can still be involved with, but maybe it helps us to focus on our limited time frame. So for your consideration, everyone.
Yes, thank you for that. I do agree, but the only thought I have is that while folks can watch this back, I feel like it's going to be appropriate for us at times to connect with our other board members, just to give them a briefing, but not to be wordsmithing and not to be, I agree, I want to do the work in the room. I actually did have a question, Dr. Reed. I found it interesting that this entire policy is under special services and not under instruction. Can you help me understand that?
I don't know that I can help you understand it. I think there are a lot of policies that, I wouldn't say unique locations, but I think we talk about the knowledge management architecture within the division, and I think part of perhaps our work is to make sure they're in the right or what you would see as a maybe more intuitive location. I think we moved a long way towards that a year ago when we subscribed to the VSBA model policies for the Commonwealth, which have model numberings and model placements. And it's been my experience that those are often very helpful, because if people move from division to division within the same state or Commonwealth, they're used to looking at certain numbers for certain policies. And uniquely, we are not necessarily aligned with that, but that would be a very simple move.
So, but is that something that we can move? Or is
Well,
it
the board
something?
can move. It's not something staff can move.
Correct. So would you agree that it probably is more appropriate in instructional services versus special services?
It would seem like it would, the regulation I have, well, it does sit under special services,
both
but I would say that there's probably a part of it that should sit within special services, and in general, because special services sits under instructional services, yes, I think it should sit in instructional services. I think there are aspects of it that are unique to special services around modifying courses, implementation of IEP for purposes of grading and so forth. But the overarching would put it in instructional services, I think, most logically.
Ms. Barron, are you done?
Well, just to that, so I just wrote down, one topic that we can discuss perhaps at the next meeting is, do we recommend, because what we're doing is we're recommending, or we're making the changes that we're going to then inform our other colleagues about, right, to vote on. So one of them could be, do we agree, right? So I wonder if we could start making some of those, and you outlined them, Ms. Lady, as part of the grading, the 6 things. I wonder if we could put that out there and be like, okay, these are the things, and is the next meeting the time to come back with all of that? Or I guess I'm being a little more logistical. How are we going to churn through this in a meaningful, thoughtful way?
I mean, it's an excellent question, and looking at them, they could take up an entire meeting in isolation. I think it'd be aspirational of us to try to tackle 3 in one meeting and 3 in another, but knowing it might be 2, 2, and 2. But we could get to a point where we are having a dialogue hypothetically, and we say that actually reassessment should not be in the policy. Or we should say, we might not get to that place. So with some of them, we could get there more quickly, and then those that we think belong in the policy, I think are going to take a lot more time to discuss in regard to how they'll be worded in the policy. All right. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. Just kind of going back to the question that you asked a little while ago, how to help organize the work. In an effort to not be repetitive, but just to show concurrence, I do agree with Ms. Marin in terms of avoiding repetition in the room, or maybe it's something that you said. I don't remember who said it. And I fully do agree with doing the work in the room, because that's the only way that our public sees what is it that we're producing. But I do want to ask, what do you anticipate will be the protocol for us to gather input from the board members? Because one of the things that I think we want to avoid is we sit here, we try to come up with something that we are all happy with, but let's be clear, it's 5 of us. The majority of our board is not here. I would hate for the work session to be an entire do-over, because it's so far off the mark from where people are heading that we end up having to go back to governance and to redo. I'd rather that we kind of build the structure with the feedback initially, and then figure out how to slot it. So I'm just wondering, in terms of how can we get the feedback from what is important to our board members? And I think that's probably easier with this policy than it would be with others, because we had the work session. So we have information that is fresh. And I don't know if anybody had written anything in the next steps or that document, Ms. Sutlow, that we had from that work session that Ms. Sizemore-Iser and I managed, if anybody provided any feedback, but I think it's important to gather and build from there.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, the only thing I'm familiar with is what happened with governance last year, which was a member of the governance committee reaching out to me incrementally and asking me specific questions related to the aspects of the policy that were being revised. And I thought that was a sort of a model way to engage those that are not here. What I don't know, because I couldn't attend that many meetings, is were those questions established, which I would assume they would have been at a committee meeting, that we're going to go back to our other board members and we're each going to ask these 5 things, or if that was, we'll have to figure out how we're going to break that down.
I can answer that question if you like.
Okay, Ms. Seisman.
That's what we did for the boundary policies. We discussed kind of section by section of the policy, and then when we had there's open questions on each one, we had those specific questions we decided in the committee meeting to take back to colleagues. Plus, there was always a sort of generic, and just give us feedback. Are we missing anything? Is there anything you want to see added? And that was each round of updates. So those questions were decided within the governance committee meetings. And it was sort of exact purpose of Dr. Anderson mentioned. We wanted to make sure that as we went through sort of overarching around the boundary policy and in each section, that we had the discussion in the room in a transparent manner, but we also got feedback along the way. So when we got to the work session, we weren't way off the mark for the rest of our colleagues were interested in.
Okay, thank you. So any more comments on sort of establishing priorities or sort of protocols for meetings? Dr. Anderson?
As we were talking about having staff review their list, if there are policies on which they are recommending no change, and there might be a great number of those, I wonder if we can set aside one meeting where all we do is review the no change memos so that we can knock out 20, 30, 40 at a time.
No, I think that's an excellent idea. I think that the goal here is to narrow down the number which next year's committee would have to review. So the way we can do that most efficiently, I think we'll absolutely try to do. So any more comments before we start to maybe, I think personally, the next steps could be to start to look at the policy as it's written now. And anyone who's been on the board, provide some context to changes that may have happened during your tenure. And then, try to sort of have a conversation about, at its face value, things that we most feel need to be updated with the way it's currently written. So, Ms. Marin?
Well, I certainly would love to hear your input, Ms. Lady, given your experience and today's timing of the meeting. And again, you already helped set this up from the grading report. So, I'm putting you on the spot, but I want to hear. I've been waiting for this because you.
So, I'll say some things about grading as someone who was a director of student services. And in that role, worked with counselors and department chairs, built the master schedule, really was responsible to making sure every student got to graduation. And being creative along the way, if we needed triage cases and a lot of things that what happens in schools to help students get to a finish line might be, hypothetically, a student has Miss Smith for English 12 and they're not succeeding. They've got an elective that they don't need towards their requirements for graduation. And so we put that student in Miss Smith twice. So they're with her every day, right? To get reinforced so they could be catching up and then also continue with what they need to do. But sort of, the interesting thing about what's happening with grading is that I think a lot of our parents and oftentimes folks our age think about how we were graded in a more traditional sense, where there were people who didn't succeed, and there were people who did. And oftentimes the people who did succeed were, naturally gifted, knew how to play school well, had supportive parents, also came into school already reading at an appropriate grade level because they had, preschool. This is a multi-layered thing, right? So where we've arrived is that time is the variable in learning. And while it might take me not that long to learn math concepts, I had a real reading disability. So for me to tackle literature, I had to read it and read it, reread it. So when I was in school, that meant I had to figure that out in my week. You know, I had to figure out in my week how often I could reread and reread, and then I'd have to go seek out my teacher because I had a set deadline when I was getting tested on a piece of literature. And what we're looking at today is the reality that for some kids, they can't do that, but also with reassessment, that gives them an opportunity to have more time. Also, there's a lot of research around standards-based instruction, and I'm actually anxious, and this might be something that Dr. Reed's shop can help get to us, but the schools that are doing standards-based instruction, I'm sort of interested in seeing how their SOL and AP or IB scores were, or how they've been each year since implementing that, to see if learning the standards in that detail is also, in turn, providing greater success on traditional assessments. Now, what we got, the standards-based instruction world doesn't grade formative assessments. But what we have now with the email from June 10 is that formative assessments will be 30% of the grade, so they're now being graded. And I think the benefit to that is that parents, because of the way the new grade book has been designed, parents can see in real time how their students are performing on formative things. And I think that was a disconnect where parents felt like they didn't know where their kids stood, sometimes in a rolling grade book or a standards-based instruction environment. Whereas now that they're required to put formative scores in, they can see that their student is doing really well or is not doing well at all prior to when that summative assessment takes place. So, you know, I think the other thing is we've talked a lot about executive functioning skills. We've talked a lot about non-cognitive skills. And, you know, to what extent are students learning those in the current environment? I will share that I was at my own physical therapy appointment today and had a couple people who were in the Chantilly community who knew me from my prior time at Chantilly High School stop me and just, you know, keeping up how your kids, you know. And one was JMU and one was Christopher Newport, and they both reported that their kids are struggling because they have deadlines. You know, they have to know it by a certain time. They don't get any reassessments or retakes and things like that. So that doesn't mean I don't think we should continue doing what we're doing, but you just kind of asked me to pontificate a little bit about grading. So I try to do that. Do you have any specific questions?
Well, I mean, as you're talking, I'm wondering a few things. One is that, you know, we represent parents and families. I would actually like to see what they see. Mm-hmm. And I'm also wondering, you know, we hear things like, well, if parents can see how their kids are doing, is that really making sense? Or like, what are the examples where students are like, you know what, this grading doesn't work for me because it's not fair because of this? And I wonder if we looked at some actual report cards, like at the meeting, and if staff could bring to us and show us, or maybe you know the specific examples, or someone else. I mean, Dr. Anderson also, of course, has been in school. But like, what's happening now and what's the problem with it? And then the other side is, what aren't we doing for students so that they're, you know, we want them to be prepared in college and after? And I know this topic of mastery of content compared with mastery of skills, or however you want to talk about that, I think that deserves a conversation. I know that's something a lot of people have, you know, opinions on, but like you just said, if a student can't study and have the executive functioning, they're not going to succeed. So are we measuring that or not? I think that's a big
Well, and I think a piece of
thing.
that too is the neurology of the brain, right? The brain development and the maturity. So some kids sort of naturally grow into that as they get older. But no, I think that those are all important things. I would love to have maybe, you know, somebody from instructional services come in and show us a demo of a grade book. And I went to a grading meeting at one of my schools, and so I saw a demo of the grade book, which was very helpful to me to understand why the grading committee made that decision to require 30% formative, to be 30% of the grade, because it forced them to show parents how the student was doing. We could still have the grade book set up that way, and it doesn't count, right? But because that's the other piece of this. We've got in many ways, we've got an interesting experiment, if you want to say, going on this year, because we've been so much a system of schools when it came to grading instead of a school system, that everyone has the directive to do this the same way this year. And I think consistency is one of the number one things our parents want. And I think that's what's going to make this work a little bit of a struggle, because we won't even have first quarter grades by the time we've got to make some decisions related to this policy. So, but I mean, I think those are great points. When you look at the title of this policy, it's promotion, retention, grading, and graduation requirements. It's not just grading. And so when we think about promotion and retention, I mean, I'll just put this out there. Given the changes to what the state is doing for accreditation, and really putting our multi-language learners in a really tough spot to become fluent in 3 semesters, it begs the question to me, do we retain any of them in middle school? Because it's once they start 9th grade that clock starts. Socially, I understand why we've never done those things. But again, sometimes you have to be outside the box and creative around, what's going to happen. I mean, there was a time when we did more retention for a variety of reasons. And I think for the most part, the economics are, we really can't afford to school students for 14 or 15 years. So we are trying to make sure that it's only done at 13, but I think it begs some questions. And also the graduation requirements. I think that from my perspective, we need to talk about that, which is interesting because they're not really in here. There's nothing in here about graduation requirements. It really is just making sure that parents are informed of how their students are performing incrementally, and then an A is a 93 to 100, A minus, just that grading scale. That's all in this policy. And I think that what we're talking about is putting more in the policy. So I'll stop talking for a second. I think, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, you've had your hand up for a bit, and then Ms. Anderson.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate the conversation. And I know, I think we were talking about sort of how to structure the work, perhaps. And again, I know we talked a little about grading philosophy, so I just want to kind of back up a little bit to how to structure the work around the policy itself. I do want to mention, I felt like someone was talking about me in terms of coming late. I was always trying to do virtual. I'm out of town caregiving for a person with disability, so I'm not sure where the confusion was, but so I kind of heard something that I just wanted to clarify for the public that's watching that I'm out of town caregiving. So I don't know if you guys can still hear me. But what I did want to say is I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of how to break this down with some of my suggestions. I think to your point, and I think this Marin's point, we need to talk about the philosophy of grading, right? Content and skills, and what is our philosophy? I think the difficulty part about this work is going to be differentiating between what should be in the policy and what should be regulation versus what should be guidelines, right? Because our policy should be the philosophy that guides our work. I can't hear if the mic's not on, so I can't hear anything.
You're breaking up a lot.
If you're talking, I can't hear you. Let me turn my camera off and see if that helps. Is that better?
I think so.
Is that better?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. It's all right. Okay. If you can hear me, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
My connection isn't great. I'm hotspotting to my phone, so I apologize.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So I guess what I was saying is I think we need to really figure out what our philosophy of grading that we want to present and get feedback from colleagues on around knowledge as well as skills. And then figure out from there how to maybe talk about the components of grading that was presented at the work session or others, and figure out what we can give guidance on from a policy perspective and what we should then leave for operational. Right? And I think that's where I feel like I'm struggling, maybe others are as well, that it's how do we do a policy that doesn't cross over into operations, right? And I think that's the difficult part about this. But I would recommend we figure out our purpose of grading, and maybe for each section, grading, retention, promotion, and graduation, and then break it into the specific sections from the work session and kind of the philosophical or policy level statement around reassessments, around grade books, around standards, or all of it, and then kind of craft the policy around each section. That would be my suggestion of how to kind of break the work down. And I'm happy to kind of put that in an email if that's helpful. I know it may be breaking up. I'll pause there and see what you think. But that was my thought.
I think all that makes sense. We discussed before you were connected virtually that we were going to look at the 6 focus areas of the work that was done by the grading committee, and also were the focal points of the work session. So we're going to get there.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go
I'm
ahead.
struggling to hear. I just what I was going to say is I think the difficult part is going to be when we discuss those 6 sections, right? How do we keep that as a philosophical guideline in the policy, right, as opposed to regulation, right? Like, what's our philosophy around reassessment? What's our philosophy to keep it at a policy level?
Right, I think we need to do that, because that'll help us determine if we are going to put anything in policy around reassessment. And I think that how we feel philosophically about it, and where we believe it lives is going to be part of the conversation. Okay, Ms. Dixit?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hi, I just wanted to just ask about our meeting. I know the schedule already had been decided, and there was Melanie emailed as well. Could we just add, see whether we have a time specific to this? Is it every time, every Monday, I think it's 2 Mondays a month? Is it going to be 3 p.m.?
It's
Robin?
Tuesdays at 3 p.m.
I'm sorry, it's Tuesday. So I forgot, this is a long weekend. So it's going to be Tuesdays for 3 p.m. The days where, and it will alternate with the work session, right?
Yes, but what we might need to do, depending on how we progress, is have 2 or 3 a month around the work session, if we can.
So after the work session?
I mean, right now we have 4 meetings before November 1. We're hoping we can get the work done.
Okay.
Okay?
Because I know governance met much more times last time, so I don't know if 4 is going to be enough, but like you said, I'm fine. I just wanted to say that, for people with day jobs, it's a little hard to do 3 p.m. every time, every other week. I would say if we're adding additional sessions, I would like it to be considered for an afternoon or 4 o'clock after that.
Okay, thank you for that. I will take that into account. Do you have any comments on what we've discussed so far in terms of policy and just what you've heard?
I think I've been listening. I had my son just graduated from FCPS, so I'm very familiar with the grading and all what because he was going through that till this year, and the comment I'm going to obviously see what we discuss as a go, but I do want to say that our students need to be more prepared for college, and giving them that additional support, that retakes and retakes can actually be detrimental for them because college don't give that extra time, and they don't give that extra time to accommodate these testing and assignment unless there's special need and IEP cases. So I'm just saying in general, so I would like to see that. And also there is, I understand the new standardized testing is, there's changing or grading, but I do want to say that if somebody is not doing good in any class, there's it's hard for me to understand how they get to the next class and the next class and the next class, and then finally they are out of FCPS as a graduate, or any school as a graduate, but they haven't honed in all the skills, and they have not learned a lot of these topics or subjects. So I don't know if we can discuss that as a part of our policy.
No, I think those are very valid points, and I think that we do need to take into account that our goal is that we ensure our graduates are workplace ready, or are college ready, or are military ready, or are gap year ready. We have to be focused on those outcome goals with some specificity. Not just I'm going to college, but which one, right? Not just I'm going, but are you starting in a 2-year? Have you already enrolled? Do you have your classes? We need to get them to that starting line after we've got them to, as we get them to the finish line, we need to ensure the starting line of the next phase. So I think it's a great point. I don't know who's next. Ms. Marin.
Thank you. So I'm craving trying to put this all in some kind of order, but I'm also liking how we're kind of meandering and trying to figure it out. So what I like to do is kind of theme things and organize. So what I'm hearing are like two big buckets of things. One are these philosophical topics, things like content mastery and skill mastery and ability. How do we reconcile those? The standard-based instruction, retakes, promotion, as Ms. Dixit just said, do we want to have a statement about students being promoted when they don't have the skills, and how is a grading policy going to ensure that students are promoted because they have the skills? And then also, and this is really from our strategic plan, defining the kinds of readiness we want the grading policy to be promoting. And then we have the technical things. So like when we talked about the title of this policy, it's got promotion, retention, grading, and graduation requirements. Could we change the title of this policy to just be grading and reporting, or report cards? But I would want to know from staff, do we talk about promotion, retention, and graduation requirements in a different policy, right? Because we could very easily change the title, but is this supposed to be the bucket where all four of those things live? But we could, and then also in this, it talks about formal reporting as a progress report. Like, let's just name it, it is a report card. Let's be clear on the words. So that's like a technical thing, and maybe the numbers and that it's in special services or ISD, that's a technical thing. So maybe that's a way, and because I'm also getting a little anxious knowing, Ms. Lady, you're stepping out for a few minutes, and I'm trying to figure out how to set us up to continue to whittle down, what the big topics are. So I don't know, for consideration there.
No, I like those buckets. I think that you've captured what people have been saying, and I think that provides a pretty strategic direction around how to tackle this. I'm going to throw one thing out there because I do have to step out, and hopefully the virtual meeting I need to attend will be quick. But I will throw this out there because it's been in my brain a lot, because I hear a lot from people like Ms. Dixit, who have high achieving children with strong academic aspirations, who want to be intellectually challenged every day they walk into their class. And I'm not saying that that's not happening, but I have wondered, can we have two grading policies? Can we have a grading policy for those students who embark on honors, AP, IB, and DE courses, and then one for standard courses required for graduation? And again, I say that also realizing that we have students who are taking AB, IP, honors, and DE courses who also are working two jobs. And for the same reasons that we have, how we're doing grading this year, in terms of time being a variable, I think helps support those students. It's clear that if you take an IB, a DE, or an AP course, because that's college level work, you're better prepared for college. But I'm throwing that out there, not that I 100% agree with my idea, I just thought I'd throw it on the table. Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. I also want to kind of start to get some big ideas on the table. One of the things that I think is, at least it's clear to me, this policy as we have, there's nothing here. It is insufficient as being way too generous. It really needs to be fleshed out, because the job of the board is to give guidance. I couldn't pick this up and create anything, which makes sense because the entire time we've been on the board members have said, how is it that staff has this guideline which no one understands where it came from? It's because this is too thin in order to provide those parameters, as Dr. Reed likes to say, provides the swim lanes. So I think we need to be super clear. I have a huge interest in grading from my work at the elementary and middle school level, from my being a parent at the middle school and high school level now. I see the grade book, and I have lots of questions very often, so I will have lots of very specific thoughts to share here. But I think one of the overarching things that we have to give to our parents and to our students is the idea of consistency. It does not make sense that a student can potentially have 7 teachers and have 7 different expectations. So that consistency has to be part of the conversation. And do I see some space for there to be maybe a core content set of guidelines versus performing arts, like, ceramics and those kinds of classes? I do see that. But that will still be consistent and be consistently applied across the division. I've had parents who have been literally screaming for 2 years because their school did 90-10, and other schools were 60-40 in terms of summative and formative. That is not a school system. That is just way too individualized. One of the things that I also want to put on the table, and you mentioned this when you first started, the research is not in support of the traditional way of doing things. It just isn't. I will put it on the table because as I shared before, half of the texts that have been that were referenced here are in my house because I've done some of this work. So the research does not tell us that if you don't learn it by Tuesday, you're done. And also that is not the reality. And I want us to be mindful of when we're saying secondary, we're saying 6 through 12. 6 through 12 is secondary for the people who live in Mason District. So the expectations that we may have of a 12th grader should not be the expectation that we have of a 6th grader who is still very much in their formative years, but are impacted by this grading
I agree, but
process.
I think that Dr. Reed clarified this is credit-bearing classes, high school credit-bearing classes, which no 6th grader takes. And, I mean,
Well, it can.
we do have 6th graders, but if you're taking Algebra 1 in 6th grade, you're getting a grade in it.
Right, so
but it's not every
minimally,
course
it's 7
they
through
take.
12.
Right.
And that is a big disparity. I know we want to ensure that students are workforce ready. I'm college ready and workforce ready. But we also have to be mindful that in the real world, when you hand your boss a report and it doesn't meet standard, it's not done. You don't get an F grade and Robin is done. Robin goes and does it again. So we have to prepare our kids for that type of environment as well.
I appreciate that. I'm going to pass the baton here to Ms. Marin.
Ms. Sizemore-Heisner, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And I just want to say I think it's intriguing your idea, Ms. Lady, about having different classes, different grading philosophies, but I worry about the biggest thing I hear from folks is around consistency, and I worry that takes away from the consistency aspect of grading.
I understand. I agree.
Yeah, and I also think that it might, I think that, when we look at skills versus knowledge, I think even if you're taking an advanced class, you may not have the strongest executive functioning skills, and in a standard class, you may have stronger executive functioning skills. So I think we really should see out the philosophy of grading and then try to have a consistent system. And maybe how it's implemented in terms of the types of assignments would be different per class, right? Maybe in terms of a ceramics class versus an algebra class, obviously the types of assessments may be different, but the philosophy, I think, should be the same. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there regarding that. And I don't know if I would necessarily fully agree that the research shows that traditional grading doesn't work. I've seen research that kind of shows aspects of standard-based grading is good and aspects of traditional grading is good. So I think that's the tension that's happening right now. And I've seen some research that kind of calls into question some of these other things. But to me, it goes back to that philosophy. If we're just looking to assess knowledge without worrying about sort of skills, then it makes sense. If we're looking at skills as well, then I think we need to kind of look beyond just, do you know how the knowledge of the standard? So just my 2 cents as we're kind of looking for these big concepts.
Thank you. Yes, it sounds like again, content mastery and then the skill mastery and ability is really something to be focused on. And maybe the policy doesn't need to say if it's either or how it's put together, but it does seem like the policy needs to recognize that those are 2 distinct, things that could be, assessed. So I am going to go back to, helping us try and figure out what is our logistical plan here, because that's where I keep going to. And I did share the dates for the remainder of the committee meetings. And so there are 4. There's one later this month, September 24th, and one right after that on October 1st, then October 15th, October 29th. So, and in between that, and then a regular meeting, we have a work session already scheduled for the budget, actually, on November 12th, but perhaps, I don't know if we need the whole time, but that is scheduled. And then we have the next work session on December 3rd. And we heard Dr. Reed say the sooner we can get it done, the better. So if we were going toward, I wonder if we could see if on November 12th, we can get some time on that work session in addition to the budget, and maybe Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, you could speak to your thoughts on that as vice chair, or we could just table that. Or we'd be looking at then really trying to get this wrapped up by.
You want to answer now, I'm sorry?
Yeah,
Or
sure.
do you want to-
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me chat with the budget show. We haven't gotten into that level of detail in our meeting on Friday, so I can get back to you on that.
Okay, great. And I think that's like a good 6-hour, meeting time save. So it seems possible that we could shave off a little bit of time at least. Well, the right amount of time.
I'm sure it would be. I just want to check with him, but I'm sure with 6 hours, we'll have plenty of time to do both.
Something I'm wondering is, are there things that members here on the committee want to learn more about between now and September 24th? I'm wondering about other school divisions' grading policies, both nearby and other, good policies elsewhere. So that'd be something that I would like to look up and see. And then I have been, again, keeping a list of things that the board would want to hear from staff. And so giving that list to the superintendent at the end of this meeting, so that on September 24th, we can come with that information, or she can come with that information so we could discuss. Well, the things that I had, do you want to, go ahead, Dr. Anderson?
No, I thought it was somebody else.
It's very loud. The things that I have written down that I heard voiced by members were walking us through, this is mine, walking us through challenges faced by students at this time, what we hear from students, what parents and families see, the grade book demo. And I know I have seen one version that a school's been doing, but I think that would be really helpful for us to understand what is happening now. And then my question about other places in the policy, can we remove the promotion, retention, and graduation requirements, at least very deeply, from the creation of this policy? And maybe that's more of a philosophical question. How much are those things integrated into the grading policy? And then a question I have is, how does grading work on a single report card when a student has a credit-bearing course and a non-credit-bearing course? And I don't know the answer to that, and how does that get worked out? So Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, Ms. Seema, Ms. Dixit, and then Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. I actually was listening to that last comment and from everyone, and I really want to discuss more this in the breadth of the subject and then go into depth. And the reason I say is we need to listen to a lot of stakeholders, and we are. You mentioned the staff, and you mentioned maybe we talk to our colleagues also. And is there a way we could do a survey for our parents too? Because I know the parents really want to be heard on this topic. They, me as a parent also, or anybody who's had a kid at FCPS at some point now, currently, there's a way we can take their input also, because it really matters a lot to them when their kids is gone to next phase of their life. Their association with the school ends, but the parents and the students' relationship is, their children relationship is lifelong. I really want their voice in this. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dixit. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser?
Cool, thank you, and I apologize for still having my camera off, and it sounds like the connection was better. I think as we look into this work, I'm wondering if generally, at least in my past experience, often we can ask staff to come back with kind of a draft of a policy based on some of the things they heard. that, and that way it keeps it as a policy versus operation level, and then we can use that as a starting point for our work. Given that this policy is so, as I think Dr. Anderson said, so bare bones, I don't know if Dr. Reed, we feel like we even have enough direction for staff to do that or not, but I wanted to put that out there as a thought. I do want staff to come back with a sort of bare bones outline of a policy that at least looks at some of these different buckets, and then we can take that as a place to start. So I don't know what we're thinking, what your thoughts on Dr. Reed or the rest of the committees.
Thanks, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser. I mean, I think I could ask staff to take a stab at it. I think it would be more helpful to know what parts of the current recommendations the board is most interested in, or the direction the board would like staff to go, so that, you know, they don't come back with something that we then, again, rewrite at the table here. So I think having a really clear sense, these are the 5 things we want staff to address when they do a rewrite draft, would, I think, be perhaps more efficient. But either way, I'm happy to go back to staff and ask them to add more to the policy. Again, I don't know if you're asking us to make the regulation a policy or to make the policy more regulation-like, or it's a little unclear how in the weeds the board wants to get on this topic. So I think if you want to provide some clear direction around that, then I can go back to staff and say, this is how, these are the topics the board wants addressed in the policy, not the regulation, not the guidance documents.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, you want to continue?
Sorry, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, I think you need to unmute. We muted you while Dr. Reed was
Oh,
answering.
I apologize. I didn't realize I was muted. Can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me okay?
We can
Okay,
hear
perfect. Dr. Lee, I appreciate that, and I think we're, in some ways, in this sort of catch-22, where understandably staff want more direction as to where the board's going, but I think, at least for, I'll speak for myself, where I'm struggling with is how do we encapsulate policy that gives clear direction, right, or guidance or philosophy to your staff to then create regulations without going into regulation or operational. I don't know necessarily that everybody wants to have it, or a policy that looks like a regulation, but I think that, at least my goal is, I'd like to have a clear enough philosophical policy direction that we don't then leave the door open, as I think this current draft of the policy, or the current version of the policy is done, which is leave the door open for people to do kind of whatever folks want to do around grading, right? Because there really is no direction in the current draft of the policy, or very little direction. So I don't know if I have a good answer for you. I think we need a draft of a policy that gives a overarching direction to staff of the where we want to go without, in my opinion, going into regulation. And I think I'm struggling to wrap my head around what that would look like. And that's, I guess, what I was asking from you and staff, to see if you could figure out what that would look like from your expertise. But also, I understand what you're saying, that you want to know which direction we're going. And maybe it's putting out like different, if you want to go this direction, here's what that might look like. I just don't want to write a policy at the table here.
Okay,
I think Ms.
I just heard a lot of talking going on.
Oh,
So
I think part of the challenge is we don't have.
I just want to give a lot of
Oh, I'll give up.
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think we have agreement, right? Like, I think there's not a, I think there, and we also currently have staff doing a variety of things. We have, we don't have a consistent approach to grading for whatever reason in the county, and haven't for the last 10 or 12 years by all accounts. So what we do have right now is a common grading scale and an expectation that students have to make a good faith effort not to get a 0, because we've reinstated zeros when there's been no effort. Those two are consistent, those two topics. All the rest of a grading policy or practice seems to be a bit at play. And even the committee didn't make a recommendation to go one way or the other directly. So even if I understood the topics you wanted staff to address, that would be helpful, because the current policy is very high level. It doesn't get into the types of grading or grading practices, quite honestly, in reviewing it. I wonder if maybe a place to start is to look at the VSBA model policy on grading. That would be something I think the board clerk would have access to. That might be a place to start.
Well, yeah, I don't know if there is one, but if there isn't, maybe that's the place to start. And maybe to the point we come up with our buckets of things we want to talk about and get guidance from our colleagues as well. And then give that to you guys and then draft something around. So I'll just leave that.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Anderson?
Thank you. I was kind of heading where Dr. Reed was heading. It is hard for staff to go forward and do something because they don't know where we are. We have to provide some parameters. And I think there's some things that, at least from what I believe I heard, and please jump in, Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, if you heard it too, because we were managing that meeting, that seemed to be things that we could start to create a framework around for this policy, because this, again, as it stands, does not say much. One, we're missing the philosophy, and that may not be something that you write. That may be something for us to figure out what that is as a board, but at least we need to start to put together some of those sections. We are missing that part of the conversation regarding grading needs to be consistency. Does that consistency need to go across all disciplines? I think consistency has to be part of the discussion. Another component that I think we need to give you some direction on is some of the same language that's in this recommendation, in the secondary advisory report. Not the how, but the what, just ensuring that we are addressing reassessment. Will that be part of our work? Use of zero. Some of the what will seem to be operational, but we should not say what it needs to look like. We just say that it has to be addressed. So that gives us the long lens with giving some flexibility for the regulation, which in my mind, the regulation should be the guidelines that you all have, rather than making that be a tertiary document. We have a policy, we have a guideline, and we have a we have the policy, we have the regulation, then we have the guidelines, which I think many of us have interpreted those guidelines as optional, but they're not. They're mandatory, and I think every employee of FCPS sees the regulations as mandatory. So what I would like to engage in for myself, I didn't come here ready to do that, is to go through this report and the recommendations to start to outline some of the things that we want to have a position on without saying how they need to be accomplished.
Yeah, I can add that, I have a lot of notes from when I reviewed the advisory committee, the secondary grading advisory committee's report. And some of those are like what I think we're calling philosophical things, the use of zero, which effectively seems to have been set by the grading scale being 50 to 100. The reassessment, are we going to reassess up to 100 as it currently stands? The committee says to use both gradebook types. Do we want to have just one? That would seem to promote consistency. What about weighting? Grade weighting, like lifting weights. And then summative versus formative. And so these, I add to the category of questions that other colleagues have outlined. And I'm, again, wondering if maybe for the remainder of this meeting, we have about 45 minutes left. Do we want to, we have 3 weeks till the next meeting. So how do we want to use this time to ask staff to do what we're going to need so that we're we're moving forward at the next meeting? Again, because when I look at the timeline, right, we have 3 weeks till the next meeting, and then it's only a short time. It's actually a week later that we come back, right? So the next meeting, September 24th on a Tuesday, 3 weeks from today. Then we have 1 week after that, October 1st. So what could be helpful to hear from the staff? And then I also wonder if people want to, and we've done this in other committees where each member, writes down their list of things, and then the chair, synthesizes that and says, okay, a majority of us are concerned about reassessment. or, just kind of say how many of us are interested in what, and then we could start to even tease out language that gives the guidance that the regulation should be specific. So again, my question to the colleagues is, are there things that we could ask right now of the superintendent so she and her staff can use the next 3 weeks to return to us with information that will help her? And could we list out those questions here today? I am taking notes, but what do people think of that idea? I mean, do we want to do that and just start?
I think it's a good idea. I want us to maximize our time here and to be effective and to be able to give them something to give Dr. Reed something to walk away with.
What do our colleagues online think? Yeah, Ms. Dixon.
I think it's a good idea. Sorry.
Go ahead, since you started already. Sorry, Ms. Dixon.
Okay, I just wanted to say I like the idea. I wanted to get feedback, like everybody's saying from the staff too. But the questions to put on our feedback, what do we need from them? Personally, I really wanted to get staff's feedback about how our current grading is preparing our students for the graduation, like post-graduation, their life or college or any other trade school, whatever they're doing. Are we making them ready? Are they're ready with? I don't know how to frame that question, but it's more towards readiness after school.
Ms.
After
Dixon,
school.
Yeah, do you have any ideas of like what kind of data would be helpful to use, and even more so like what we have? I mean, because the strategic plan does get to this, but like thinking like what information would you want to see that would show you that students are ready?
More than data, this is more of a subjective question, or more open-ended, and I believe in it's going to be hard to get a data point on that. It's more of a feedback, like there's a room of improvement here, and because I know our counselors do deal with the students who are gone to college and then or gone to trade school or whatever else, like associate degree, and then see how they're doing it. How many have completed graduation? How many have dropped off for whatever reason is. Maybe that may be helpful to know, that maybe that data point, if we can figure that out.
Yeah, I captured that. So what I'm doing is I'm making a list and I'm putting in who's asking for it, just so we can review, and maybe we could have our own next steps document for this committee meeting. I don't know, but I have that one. So yeah, go ahead.
And I have one more question. How many students which do grade get less than 60% on any so like, I don't know, the F is 60%, right? Fail
50.
percentage.
It's 50.
I don't know.
It's 50.
50?
Yeah.
50. Okay. So how many students who have got F in, say, 3 subjects or 4 subjects, and in many years or many subjects in a year, they're getting still promoted to the next year?
Got it. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Anderson, do you want to go ahead? And so what we're doing, Ms. Lady, is we've decided it would be helpful to capture our questions to give to the superintendent now, because the next meeting, which is 3 weeks away, then will give time so that we receive the information we're seeking.
Sure. I just started typing it here, but one of the things that I'd like to know in framing of the policy is the weighting of summative and formative assessments to be consistent across schools. The type of grade book to, again, to have consistent practices across schools with flexibility for certain disciplines. It doesn't mean that school A is going to have art be on a rolling grade book and school B is going to have art be on a quarterly grade book. It has to be, whatever art is, it has to be consistent across our schools. So those are the 2 things that I just started. Go ahead.
But Dr. Anderson, you're asking for the data about what is used now.
Well, I think we have a sense of what's used now broadly. I think I'm looking at the things I'd like to be included in this draft policy that staff could be potentially working on. because in the secondary report, there were some data that spoke to the inconsistencies, but not to that granular level. I'm not sure if it's helpful. I don't know if we should chase that data to help write this policy. That might be just work for work's sake. I'm just going to continue typing, but those are my 2 things for right now.
Okay, Miss Lady.
Well, just real quick on that, I think that in the work session, the PowerPoint, there was a slide that broke down exactly what's going on. So are you asking for more detail than was in that work session slide?
No, I don't want any more detail. I want these.
Do you want to understand philosophically whether or not that should be something that's in the policy around everyone will use a rolling grade book?
Right.
Everyone will be, okay,
Right, I don't need any additional information on that.
okay, yeah. I agree with that, with your question then.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, did you want to voice your questions?
Yeah, I think I'd like to get a sense of what, in terms of looking at the bigger picture, while I appreciate those topics that came out of the work session, I feel like we need to, again, get the philosophy of grading and then look at how those pieces fall into the piece. So I guess I would like to get some sense of what would a potential purpose or philosophy of a policy look like if we're just looking at assessing knowledge, if we're looking at assessing knowledge and skills, or as my colleague Ms. Dixon said, how do we write a philosophy of grading that assesses ensuring our students are post-secondary ready, whether it's college, career, military? How do we write that philosophy of grading, and then what are the pieces into assessment that we need to look at that help ensure that we know our students or are assessing that our students are post-secondary ready? That's what I'd like to kind of get a sense of from staff.
You know what?
What is the philosophy for post-secondary readiness, and what is the pieces that we want to assess?
But are you asking for an
I'll stop
actual,
there.
Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, are you asking for an actual sample of what, for instance, a grading policy that recognizes content, knowledge, and mastery, and then another policy that recognizes content, knowledge, and mastery plus the skills piece? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know if I'm looking at quite that specifically. I would like to see what a philosophy looks like that that goes to recognizing post-secondary success, whatever that means, right? I mean, I have my ideas and thoughts around that, but like at the end of the day, I think we all are trying to graduate students who are ready to be successful at their next path. And so how do we assess for that? And what does that philosophy look like?
I mean, it sounds like it's a strategic plan. Like, how does this tie to the strategic plan when we talk about every student ready, graduating ready to succeed? And so whether that's grading policy and other things, that just keeps coming up for me, for whatever that's worth to colleagues.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like, how do we assess that? And then how do we ensure that assessment is both consistent in its implementation, but also flexible enough to be able to be applied in a ceramics class versus an algebra class versus like how can we find that balance? That's what I'd like to kind of see in the philosophy, and I think then the conversation on the specific reassessments, grade books, et cetera, will kind of fall into place after we sort of get that big piece done. So that's what I'm interested in for the next
Yeah,
meeting.
and that really ties with what Ms. Dixit
Thank
had
you.
said too. Yeah, and that ties with what Ms. Dixit had said too, right? How do we know that they're really ready? So I definitely see a theme there. I have a lot of things, a lot of questions, and some of them I just wonder if there are things that once we depart from the meeting, I could kind of send back to the committee. That's just my own brainstorming of the 6 things in the, I take that back. I'm not gonna send my own thoughts back. But, in the report that we heard on Tuesday, the presentation, the work of the Secondary Grading Advisory Committee was to focus on 6 grading practices. And to me, each one of them seems ripe to have more information and have a conversation. Someone mentioned the gradebook type, whether it's quarterly or rolling, the gradebook weighting, the minimum number of assignments. I know that's been a point of concern from parents and students, the reassessment, the use of letter grades, and then the use of 0. But the use of 0 kind of seems moot because the grading scale's already been set with 50 as a low, but I'm not sure. So Yeah, well, the things that I would like the staff to come back with is what Ms. Lady recommended, which was a demo of the grade book, and really just walking us all through what students see and what families see. I mean, I have a high school student, and I'm not going to see her grading her grades yet, but I think that would be good to know. So anyway, Ms. Lady, did you want to add something?
Just want to reiterate the importance of connecting to a strong start for kids who graduate, right? So, I agree with a lot of the sentiments around promotion, and I think that it's hard for a student who's dutiful and following up and doing things to actually fail courses because you only have to earn a 60% to pass, and if you attempt work and get a 50, then you're going to pass, right? So, to Ms. Dixit's point about situations where do we have kids that are actually graduating who can't do certain things? And the answer is they have to pass barrier tests to graduation, right? So they have to be able to pass a reading and a writing test. They have to pass mathematics tests. They have to pass other standards in science and social studies. So I don't believe we're graduating kids who can't read or write, which I think, people could have been critical of back in, when I was in high school. I'm confident of that. But the question is, are our kids fully prepared who are going to a four-year institution that's not going to have the same guardrails in place? I don't know what that means, because what's hard is a one-size-fits-all policy. Therefore, to Dr. Anderson's point, there certainly needs to be more in it than is in it now. But at the same time, I think that there's nothing wrong with allowing, as long as grade books are consistent and the type, and whether it's, a lot of people want to do a 4.0 scale. They want to do a 0 is a 0, a D is a 1, a C is a 2, a B is a 3, and a 4 is an A, because then the power of the zero is irrelevant. It doesn't factor the same way as when it's done as a percentage point, but you either, you get one of those and then you assign grades that way. But those are the kind of things I think that we need to decide, because that's the consistency our community is looking for. But in terms of questions for staff, my thing is, what are we doing with clearinghouse data, and that allows us to go back and see how our students who matriculated to 2- and 4-year schools, how they did. Did they come back second semester? Did they come back to the same school the next year? What's the graduation rates of 4, 5, and 6 years? Those are the outcome goals that we need to be evaluating, and have any of those trends changed since COVID and post-COVID grading changes, if you will. So would be one of my bigger questions, to help us measure how well we're preparing kids to thrive in 2- and 4-year schools.
I guess I also have a question or a statement, because, our institutions of higher ed are not accountable to any uniform set of standards. Our students, we are doing our best to get them ready, but there's no guarantee that a college has to complete educating a student in a certain amount of time. There are no standardized assessments, really, other than the SAT, which is run by a privately owned business. And what might be successful for one student who maybe struggles in executive functions but is a brilliant mathematician might not be what the other student needs. And then, we haven't even talked about, we're talking about grading of the core academics, but what about the arts and our students who are athletes? How does the grading policy do the best that we can while the students are here, and then also set them up for success for a set of measurements that we have no control over and there's no uniform standard for? And also knowing that we have a ton of career and technical fields that are vacant now that might be great matches for students. And so how are we considering that, and not just talking about the 4-year college going? So, Ms. Lade, did you want to?
No, I think those are great points. I think that what colleges are battling with is return on investment. what parents and potential students are asking is, where are your graduates? Where are they going? What do they get for their money? While I don't like U.S. News World Rankings, there are definitely measurements that will help a student understand, based on whatever institution they might be choosing, how well they help ensure a student graduates in 4 years versus 5 or 6, and what other things they have in place in terms of job placements or vocational or co-op. But I think we also, and this is, it's kind of an added challenge to do this work also at the same time of lighthouse schools and trying to be more innovative, right? I mean, I know that one of my schools changed its bell schedule, went back to a constant this year, and they're also trying to work as a lighthouse school to get students out of the building to get hands-on work experience, be it in a skills-based situation or be it in a, an area that requires a 4-year degree or even more, to get that exposure. So again, we can go in all different directions here, but our return investment that we're being measured upon are, as we get kids to the finish line, are they set up for the next starting line and for a strong start? Which also, begs the question, we talk a lot about a lot of skills-based, what's going on now is in IT. And I don't know if you saw, but I believe the state just adopted that we have to start teaching computer science concepts starting in kindergarten. Well, on top of, and it's not for this year, I think it's supposed to be implemented the 25-26 school year, if I read it correctly. But, talking with someone who works in elementary school, I mean, there's so much required things that are being put upon them, that it's squeezing out the arts and things like that, which we don't want to do, right? But we also need to pay attention to the fact that even within the arts world, a lot of those kids are going to be successful musicians or people in theater or people in journalism. And so we need to figure out how to get them a skills-based experience as well.
Thanks, Ms. Lady. So something I'm wondering about, just to keep pushing us towards this plan, right, of this very interesting and amorphous in some ways content. So I've captured down what board members have asked for staff that they would like to have presented and shared in 3 weeks' time. And just like in our regular board, in our work sessions, that can be shared as a next step. Perhaps we can do it that way, and I don't know if we want to do it. Maybe everyone just needs their things. Yeah, everyone needs these questions answered. And it's not a huge list, Dr. Reed. I think, yeah, so I'll share that, or the chair will share that after. One thing I'm wondering is, what if between now and September 24th, each of us on the committee go back through the advisory committee's, the grading committee's report and look at those 6 topical areas: gradebook type, gradebook weighting, minimum number of assignments, reassessment, use of the letter grades, and use of the 0. And really decide if we agree where the grading committee landed or not, and is there something in addition to these 6 main parameters? I had questions about each of these, like what is happening now with each of these areas. What I'm also wondering, like, what did middle school principals think? What did high school principals think? Because there were stakeholder groups, so I'd like to see the raw data of who said what. And like, what's best practice? What's most common in Virginia, especially when we're talking about helping our students, have the path to our public institutions. And then also like some modeling. So if we did choose to do, a quarterly gradebook only, what would need to happen, including like impact on our systems and technology? Would we need to, what kind of Schoology training would be needed? What kind of, and then just overall, a big question that I had was, do we agree with the grading committee's overall guiding principles, which were on page 6 of the report? I think we all should determine whether we each agree with those as a basic tenet. So this is what, just to reiterate, and again, I'm kind of brainstorming and welcoming any input and guidance, but just trying to get us to a plan. So if in the next 3 weeks, we have this list of questions we've identified for the superintendent's response, to come back in 3 weeks so we can discuss it at the governance committee meeting. In the meantime, if each of us on the committee reviewed those 6 grading practices of the grading committee, and do we agree where the grading committee, is going, or is there something, different? And then, but also, do we agree with the guiding principles stated on page 6 of the committee's report, which maybe those are a good starting place for the policy even? So, Dr. Anderson? I see your hand.
Thank you for bringing that back. One of my comments that I sent to Dr. Reed and to staff, which I CC'd the board on when I sent my original comments on this report, one of my first things were regarding the principles. I think they're very strong principles, and I think these, at least for me, I don't know where we are consensus-wise, but for me, they really lay out our essential beliefs. So, and in even a subsequent conversation with Dr. Presidio just after the work session last week, I said to him, these could live they're very broad, they're very high level. They could live to begin our conversations on our beliefs and philosophy. So I am a huge fan of how this has been outlined. But again, I know we need to have more feedback.
I think the principles are great. I agree. I think they capture, and I will say this, and I didn't say this during the work session, but I do have a couple of former colleagues, friends who were part of the focus groups that came into different schools. And it's my understanding anyone on faculty who was invited to be a part of the focus group if they chose to. And these folks having some interest did, and they said they had never been asked such fantastic questions about grading in their life. That for them, the experience was sort of almost, an epiphany, an eye-opening around, they hadn't thought from some of the perspectives that the questions challenged them or invited them to share. So I think it was, what led to this document, I think they got some good information from those focus groups, but I do think that a discussion of those guiding principles is a great idea.
Well, cool. Do our online colleagues have anything they'd like to add? Sure. Ms. Dixit.
No, I'm in agreement with everybody, whatever shared Ms. Lady just mentioned too. And I would like to read the reports in the next 3 weeks and can kind of get prepared more for the next meeting. And do want to just again understand this philosophically, what we are trying to achieve, rather than just going it and just looking at the measures and just make it I want to do it for the right reason and understand and then do it. So I will be spending my time to understand this more.
Sounds good. Thank you. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think I'm in agreement that I think these reports and the guiding principles are good starting points. I just want to maybe just put out in the air that I want to be careful not to rely too much on those, because the purpose for those were created was because the grading committee was asked to look at specific areas that were that had inconsistencies and causing concerns. And the purpose of what we're doing is to kind of back up a little bit and create a grading philosophy to help guide the committee going forward. So I don't want to sort of create that based on this grading committee that was created, from my understanding at least, to look at specific issues and not really look at grading as a philosophical and big picture. So I think we can help definitely guide our work, but I don't think it should just be what we're looking at, because the purpose of that wasn't to inform the grading policy. It was to look at specific areas, my understanding of inconsistency. And if I'm incorrect in my understanding, I welcome other thoughts on that. But I just want to be careful not to rely too much on something that wasn't created for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just realized that I can turn the meeting back over to our chairperson here. So, Ms. Lady, here you go.
Thank you. I'm glad my meeting went pretty quickly. So I do think that we've had a healthy dialogue here today. I think the questions that we will be sharing with the superintendent will help drive the work for the next meeting. And I agree, we do need to do our work. While most of us probably read the documents for the work session, I'm not sure we printed them and digested them and made notes all over them. And I think that's sort of the next step if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. But I do agree that we have to keep as a priority that what we really have received from the public is a request for consistency school to school. And so ultimately, the things that we are discussing, we need to establish, determine, agree upon what needs to be tight, and then what could perhaps be school-based decision, or even collaborative team by collaborative team, or it could be that everyone who teaches AP US history in Fairfax County, that they, as a larger collaborative team, will do things the same way. I just think we need to be, realize also what we would be requiring of staff time to establish some of those things, and how that would be created. So just some thoughts, but I think that we've done some good work. Dr. Reed, do you have anything else you want to add before we adjourn?
I just have a question in terms of setting expectations or managing expectations. When will I be receiving the list that you all sort of collate or put together that you want a response
I'd say
to?
today.
Today?
I've got it
Okay.
typed up. I just want to give it a once over, and someone emailed me something, so
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Can I also put together some thoughts I was going to email out, so perhaps you can kind of combine all of that.
Sure. May I suggest Robin be the keeper of those so that she is the one relaying it to the superintendent? So I'll send along my things as well.
Yes, thank you both.
Sure.
Okay, before we adjourn, anyone else have any comments, questions, remarks? Ms. Sizemore-Heiser, are you good?
Can I get a setup for?
Sorry, I was just lowering my hand. I'm good. Thank you.
Madam Chair.